Hi, this is Larry the Barberman of larrythebarberman.com, and today we are going to discuss how to zero gap an Andis Styliner M3. This is exactly the same process for the Styliner 2. This is one of my favorite trimmers for zero gapping, owing to the fact that the zero gapping takes place off of the trimmer. So you don't have the process of trying to zero gap it and hold the trimmer at the same time. You basically detach the blades completely and then basically begin the procedure from there. So with that said, let's get down to zero gapping the M3 Styliner. Is all you need to perform this task is a flathead screwdriver for one and a high grade Phillips screwdriver for two, because the last thing you want to do is damage the screws on top of the clipper, because that won't, we will not be able to tighten them onto the clipper. So there you go. So let's start. Turn the clipper onto its belly, and then we need to loosen both of these two screws. Well, not loosen them, basically remove them. So we just take those off completely. And then what I'll do is I'll explain the architecture of the blade so we know exactly where we are. Alright, so there you go. Just remove the blade completely. And now I'll explain why I love this blade so much. Basically, this here, the darker piece of metal, is what's called the T-guide. And what you have here is the T-guide screws. So what you do to zero gap this, you basically loosen all three of these screws, and this is where you just loosen them. Oh, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Yes, this is the T-guide, and these are the T-guide screws. And what the T-guide does, it's like a ledge which the cutting blade runs along. So what we're doing, we're basically lifting up the T-guide, being this arm, to rest the cutting blade on top, and that's what it's going to basically use as a trail or a track. And that's what we're doing. We're basically bringing the cutting blade closer to the comb blade so we can get a tighter, cleaner cut. Yeah. So back to what I was saying. We're going to just loosen all of these screws, just slightly, you know, because what we want to do, we want to use the tightness of the screws as a brace, but we need to move it at the same time. So lots of people use mirrors and wood and all kinds of stuff like that to get the zero gap. I mean, this is something that you should be able to do by eye, because ultimately the end result is you're going to have to do this by eye anyway when tightening it, because that's where the real issues come around. When you try and tighten them, they can move out of position. So loosen those two there, and then once they're loose, you just basically bring it up, and you just want it just underneath the comb blade, because the last thing you want to do after you've zero gapped it is it to cut your client, and that's exactly what will happen if it's too close. So I just do a slight finger check, and then I put the blade kind of halfway between light and shadow to see exactly where it is, and to my eyes that's a perfect zero gap. So what you then do, you then rest it down slightly, making sure it doesn't move. I then put my finger on it and first tighten the flathead. Then double check it hasn't moved position. Again, hold it down again. Give the center flathead a screw, tighter, add more tension to it. Again, look down it, make sure the cutting blade hasn't moved, and then basically tighten the left and right screw. And that's your zero gap process complete. And now what we need to do is reattach it to the actual clipper itself. Which is quite simple. You just basically put the blade back on. Use your fingers at the beginning just to put the screws in place, because it's, you know, if you try and go in with a screwdriver, they're going to go all over the place. So first start off with your fingers. Once you've got them in with your fingers, then what you need to then do is basically screw them in tight. So this is great, because normally you have to hold the blade against the trimmer or the clipper and then do this process, but you're setting it off of the trimmer, which stops all the horrible fiddly process here. So there you go, one Andis Styliner M3 zero gap. So I'm going to take a still picture of this so you can get in really tight and see what I've done. What we want to do to make sure that it's shop floor ready, we now want to power it up and basically use the back of our forearm and the forearm just to check that this doesn't break the skin. If it doesn't break the skin, then you know that it's shop ready. So because this is a US hair clipper, I'll be plugging it into the frequency 60 Hertz converter, which allows you to use American clippers seamlessly over here in the UK. So let's just power that up. Just plugging that into the frequency 60 Hertz. So we plug that in. As you can hear, there's no noise or performance issues there. And basically what we do, we just test it on the back of our hand. As you can see, it's not cutting my arm. So there I know that we've got a really good zero gap and we're not going to cut our clients. Yeah? So that's another demonstration from Larry the Barberman. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, I would ask that you subscribe to my channel, and there'll be plenty more tips and tricks on how to repair and modify your hair clippers, trimmers and shavers. So from now, Larry the Barberman signing off. Thank you.